What if the stranger you trusted with your ride turned out to be the safest place your heart had ever known? The rain began before sunrise and refused to stop. By late afternoon, every major highway leading into downtown Portland had become a ribbon of glowing brake lights stretching for miles. Traffic alerts flashed across every phone. News helicopters circled overhead. Drivers leaned against their steering wheels with tired eyes while windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the relentless storm. Claire Whitmore sat silently in the back seat of a black SUV, watching sheets of rain blur the city into streaks of gray and silver. As the CEO of one of America's fastest-growing logistics companies, she had negotiated billion-dollar contracts without blinking, but nature cared little about executive schedules. Her final meeting had been cancelled. Flights were delayed indefinitely. Hotels were already filling beyond capacity. For the first time in years, her perfectly organized calendar had surrendered to complete uncertainty. Up front, Nathan Mercer adjusted the heater slightly before glancing into the rearview mirror. He had driven executives for nearly 4 years, and unlike many chauffeurs, he understood that silence was often the greatest courtesy. His calm presence somehow made the endless wait feel less exhausting. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply focused on the road ahead, even when the road barely moved an inch every 10 minutes. Outside, emergency vehicles crawled past with flashing lights reflecting across flooded pavement. The rain drummed softly against the roof like thousands of patient fingertips. Somewhere nearby, a church bell echoed through the storm, almost swallowed by the sound of distant thunder. Claire finally looked away from her phone after reading yet another cancellation notice. "How much longer?" she asked quietly. Nathan studied the navigation screen before offering an apologetic smile. "Honestly, ma'am, maybe another 5 or 6 hours if nothing changes." She leaned back, closing her eyes. "That's unbelievable." He nodded once. "There's a neighborhood about half a mile from here. My house is there." Claire opened her eyes, surprised by the unexpected comment. Nathan kept both hands lightly on the steering wheel. "If you're comfortable with it, you could wait there until the roads reopen. My daughter baked too many chocolate chip cookies this morning. She'd probably insist on sharing them." Claire almost smiled, then caught herself. She had spent years being warned never to trust strangers, never to blur professional boundaries, never to step into someone else's private world. Yet something about Nathan never felt uncertain. Perhaps it was the quiet confidence in his voice. Perhaps it was the absence of any hidden agenda. Or perhaps genuine kindness always carried a language that needed no explanation. She looked through the rain-soaked windshield again. Thousands of cars remained frozen beneath dark clouds with no sign of movement. Then she looked at the man who had never once complained despite spending the entire afternoon trapped in the same impossible traffic. After several long seconds, she whispered, "All right, if I'm not imposing." Nathan's smile remained gentle. "You won't be. Around our table, there's always room for one more." Neither of them realized that before the night was over, Claire Whitmore would discover that the humble single father driving her across the city had once worn a badge respected by an entire state, and the quiet dignity he carried every single day had been forged long before she ever stepped into the back seat of his car. If you enjoy thoughtful stories with real emotion, please subscribe and support the channel. We truly appreciate it. And for those watching, have you ever experienced something like this in your own life? Share your story in the comments. Now, let's get back to the story. The neighborhood sat on slightly higher ground where the floodwater never quite reached the front porches, and after a short walk beneath Nathan's oversized umbrella, they arrived at a modest white farmhouse tucked beneath towering maple trees. Warm golden light glowed through the windows, standing in quiet contrast to the cold gray storm surrounding it. Wind chimes swayed gently beneath the porch roof, their soft notes drifting through the steady rain. Nathan unlocked the front door and stepped aside. "Welcome," he said simply. "Please come in before you catch a cold." Claire hesitated for only a moment before crossing the threshold. The scent of fresh cinnamon, baked chocolate chip cookies, and homemade chicken soup wrapped around her like a familiar memory she could not quite place. It was the kind of home that could never be purchased with an executive bonus or designed by an expensive interior decorator. Everything reflected care rather than perfection. Family photographs rested on wooden shelves. Children's drawings covered one corner of the refrigerator. A small stack of library books sat beside a comfortable armchair with a knitted blanket folded neatly across its back. Before Claire could take another step, the sound of quick footsteps echoed down the hallway. "Dad!" A cheerful voice filled the room as a young girl with shoulder-length blonde hair ran toward Nathan and wrapped both arms around him. He laughed softly, kneeling to hug her. "Easy there, Lily. You almost knocked me over." She smiled brightly before noticing the unfamiliar guest. Her excitement immediately softened into polite curiosity. "Hello," she said with careful manners. "I am Lily." Claire found herself smiling without effort. "Hello, Lily. I am Claire." Lily looked up at her father. "Is Miss Claire staying until the rain stops?" Nathan nodded. "If she does not mind having dinner with us." Lily clapped her hands once. "That is wonderful. I made cookies this morning, but Dad says I always bake too many." Claire laughed quietly. "I have never considered too many cookies to be a real problem." Lily grinned with obvious satisfaction before disappearing toward the kitchen. Nathan placed Claire's overnight bag beside the staircase. "I hope you do not mind Simple." Claire slowly removed her raincoat, studying the peaceful room around her. "Simple is not the word I would use." He raised an eyebrow. "No." She looked toward the family photographs again. "Peaceful. That is the word." Nathan did not answer immediately. Instead, he hung both coats by the door and quietly wiped the rainwater from the hardwood floor with a small towel before. Anyone could slip. It was such an ordinary gesture that Claire almost missed it, yet somehow it revealed more about his character than hours of conversation ever could. As thunder rolled gently across the distant hills, Lily returned carrying 3 steaming mugs of hot chocolate with complete determination despite the oversized tray in her small hands. Nathan immediately reached over to steady it without taking control away from her. "Nice and slow," he encouraged. "You have got it." She placed the mugs safely on the coffee table and looked up proudly. "See? I did it." Nathan smiled with unmistakable pride. "I never doubted you." Claire watched the exchange in silence. She had attended leadership seminars worth thousands of dollars, listened to celebrated motivational speakers, and read countless books about building successful teams. Yet the quiet patience Nathan showed his daughter in those few simple seconds taught a lesson no conference ever had. Outside, the storm continued to hold the city hostage. Inside, surrounded by warmth, laughter, and the gentle rhythm of ordinary family life, Claire felt something she had not experienced in years. She was no longer counting meetings, checking market reports, or watching the clock. For the first time in a very long while, she simply felt at home. After the warmth of hot chocolate settled into the evening, Lily insisted that Claire see the rest of the house before dinner. Nathan smiled with quiet surrender. "Only the rooms that are not a disaster," he joked. Lily giggled. "Dad says that every time, but everything is already clean." Claire followed the little girl down a narrow hallway where polished wooden floors creaked softly beneath each step. Family photographs lined the walls. Some showed camping trips beside crystal-clear lakes. Others captured birthday cakes, school concerts, and quiet afternoons in the backyard. One frame held a picture of Nathan standing beside a smiling woman whose eyes looked remarkably like Lily's. Claire paused for a brief moment before continuing. She did not ask questions. Some stories deserved to be invited rather than demanded. Lily pushed open the study door with obvious excitement. "This is where Dad reads every night." The room was modest but carefully organized. Shelves filled with history books, biographies, and classic American novels surrounded a sturdy oak desk worn smooth by years of use. Rain tapped gently against the nearby window while an old desk lamp cast a warm circle of light across neatly stacked notebooks. Claire wandered toward the bookshelf, noticing that every object seemed to have its own place. There was no clutter. No extravagance. Only quiet order. Her attention drifted toward a small wooden cabinet whose door had not fully closed. Inside, something metallic reflected the lamplight. Before she could stop herself, curiosity drew her closer. Resting on a folded navy blue cloth was a polished service badge enclosed in a glass display case. Beside it lay several medals attached to carefully pressed ribbons, each arranged with unmistakable precision. A folded American flag rested behind them, protected inside a triangular wooden frame. Claire frowned slightly. Drivers did not usually keep collections like these. Before she could read the engraved nameplate beneath the badge, Nathan appeared quietly in the doorway. His footsteps had been so light that she had not heard him approach. For a brief second, surprise crossed his face before it disappeared beneath his familiar calm expression. He stepped forward, gently closed the cabinet door, and offered an apologetic smile. Just a few things from another chapter of life. Claire looked at him with growing curiosity. You never mentioned any of this. Nathan shrugged lightly. Because it is over. His answer was simple, almost effortless, as though those carefully preserved memories belonged to someone else entirely. Lily skipped toward the hallway. Dad used to help lots of people. Nathan smiled gently at his daughter. Go see if the soup is ready for us, sweetheart. She nodded happily and disappeared into the kitchen. Silence settled between the two adults as rain continued its steady rhythm outside. Claire glanced toward the cabinet once more. Those look important. Nathan rested one hand against the edge of the desk. They mattered once. These days I care more about helping Lily finish her math homework than polishing old medals. Claire searched his face, expecting pride, nostalgia, or even sadness. Instead she found something she rarely encountered in boardrooms or award ceremonies. Peace. It was not the peace of someone who had achieved everything. It was the peace of someone who no longer needed recognition to know who he was. As they turned to leave the study, a faint crackle echoed from a small radio resting on the corner shelf. A dispatcher's voice briefly came through before dissolving into static. Nathan reached over almost automatically and lowered the volume with practiced ease. The motion was so natural that Claire noticed it immediately. He caught himself a second later and quietly switched the radio off without explanation. She said nothing, but another small piece of the puzzle settled into place. Whatever life Nathan Mercer had lived before becoming the gentle father who baked cookies with his daughter and drove executives through the city, it had been far more extraordinary than he was willing to admit. By the time dinner was ready, the storm had settled into a steady rhythm against the windows, wrapping the little house in a quiet cocoon of warmth. Nathan carried a cast iron pot to the center of the table while Lily carefully arranged 3 mismatched bowls as though she were preparing a feast for honored guests. The aroma of homemade chicken soup filled the room, blending with the lingering scent of fresh bread and melted butter. Claire stood for a moment beside the table, unexpectedly reluctant to interrupt the peaceful scene unfolding before her. Nathan noticed her hesitation and pulled out a chair with a gentle smile. It is nothing fancy, he said. But it has always been our favorite meal when it rains. Claire took her seat. Honestly, it smells better than most restaurants I visit. Lily beamed with pride. Dad makes the soup. I make the cookies. We are a team. Nathan laughed softly. She also reminds me when I forget to water the tomatoes. Lily pointed at him with playful seriousness. Because you always forget. Claire laughed, and the sound surprised even her. It had been months since laughter had come so naturally. During most dinners she attended, conversations revolved around quarterly earnings, market forecasts, mergers, and investor expectations. Every meal felt like another board meeting. Here, the discussion centered on whether Lily's science project would survive until Friday and whether the neighborhood squirrels were secretly stealing tomatoes from the garden. It felt wonderfully ordinary. Nathan served the soup last, making sure everyone else had enough before filling his own bowl. Claire quietly noticed every small gesture. He always placed Lily first without making it obvious. He listened before speaking. He thanked his daughter when she passed the bread basket as though she had done something extraordinary. Respect seemed woven into every simple interaction. Halfway through dinner, Lily looked at Claire with bright curiosity. "Dad says you help a lot of people at work. Is that true?" Claire smiled politely. "I try to. Sometimes helping people means making difficult decisions." Lily tilted her head thoughtfully. "Dad says the hardest choices are usually the ones that tell you who you really are." Claire slowly turned toward Nathan. "You taught her that?" He shrugged modestly. "Children remember what we repeat. I try to repeat the right things." For several seconds, no one spoke. The rain continued tapping against the windows while the grandfather clock in the hallway marked another quiet minute. Claire looked around the table again. There were no expensive decorations, no designer furniture, no symbols of wealth. Yet somehow the room felt richer than the luxurious dining halls where she entertained clients every week. After dinner, Lily carried the empty bowls toward the sink. Nathan immediately stood beside her. "I can wash. You dry." She nodded happily. They worked together without needing instructions, moving with the easy rhythm of people who had shared hundreds of evenings exactly like this one. Claire offered to help, but Nathan smiled kindly. "Tonight you are our guest." She remained seated, watching father and daughter quietly tease each other about whose turn it was to choose the weekend movie. Their laughter blended with the soft hum of the dishwasher and the gentle whisper of rain outside. In that simple kitchen, surrounded by ordinary moments most people would never notice, Claire felt an unfamiliar ache deep inside her heart. She had spent years building an empire that reached across the country, yet somewhere along the way she had forgotten what success looked like when measured in patience instead of profit, kindness instead of influence, and time shared around a small wooden table instead of applause inside a crowded ballroom. As Nathan finished drying his hands, he looked toward the window where the storm still covered the darkened streets. "Sometimes," he said quietly, almost to himself, "the longest delays end up bringing us exactly where we were supposed to be." Claire met his eyes across the room, and for reasons she could not yet explain, those simple words stayed with her far longer than any speech she had ever heard in a corporate boardroom. The evening settled into an easy silence as the rain softened from a heavy downpour to a steady whisper across the roof. Lily curled up in the living room with a coloring book while Nathan added another small log to the fireplace. The gentle crackling of the flames mixed with the ticking clock on the mantel, creating the kind of peaceful soundtrack Claire had almost forgotten existed. She wrapped both hands around a fresh mug of coffee, breathing in its rich aroma, when a pair of headlights slowly swept across the front window. A pickup truck rolled into the driveway before stopping beside the porch. A moment later came 3 polite knocks at the front door. Nathan smiled faintly. "That will probably be Frank." He opened the door to reveal an older man in his late 60s wearing a weathered flannel jacket and a baseball cap darkened by the rain. "Evening, Nathan," the man said warmly. "Just wanted to make sure you and Lily were doing all right after hearing about the highway being shut down." Nathan welcomed him inside with the easy familiarity of lifelong neighbors. "We are doing just fine. Come in and warm up for a minute." Frank removed his cap and noticed Claire sitting near the fireplace. "Oh, I did not realize you had company." Nathan made the introductions. "Frank Donovan lives 2 houses over." "Frank, this is Claire Whitmore." Frank offered a friendly handshake. "Nice to meet you." Claire returned the smile. "Likewise." Lily hurried over and hugged the older man around the waist. "Did your power stay on?" Frank chuckled. "Sure did, thanks to that generator your dad helped me install last winter." Nathan shook his head with a modest grin. You paid me with homemade pie. We are even. Frank laughed heartily. Best deal I ever made. The conversation drifted naturally from the weather to neighborhood repairs and the upcoming school fundraiser. Claire listened quietly, noticing how easily Nathan made everyone around him feel comfortable. There was no effort, no performance, only genuine kindness. As Frank accepted a cup of coffee, his eyes wandered toward the hallway where one of the framed family photographs hung on the wall. His smile softened with quiet admiration. You know, he said, looking toward Claire, most folks around here only know Nathan as the nicest driver in town. They have no idea who he used to be. Nathan immediately looked down at his coffee. Frank. The older man raised one apologetic hand. I know. You do not like talking about yourself. Claire glanced from one man to the other without saying a word. Frank continued gently. There was a time when half this county slept a little easier because of him. He was the kind of officer every parent hoped would answer the call when something went wrong. Calm. Fair. Never loud. Never looking for attention. Nathan quietly stirred his coffee without meeting anyone's eyes. That was a long time ago. Frank smiled. Maybe. But some things deserve to be remembered. He looked toward Lily. Your father taught a whole lot of people that wearing a badge was never about power. It was about earning trust every single day. Lily smiled proudly as though she had heard those words many times before. Nathan gently changed the subject by asking about Frank's grandchildren and the conversation moved on, but Claire barely heard another sentence. Her thoughts lingered on the quiet respect in Frank's voice. It was not admiration born from headlines or public ceremonies. It was something deeper, something earned over years of ordinary moments that had quietly shaped an entire community. As Frank prepared to leave, he placed one hand on Nathan's shoulder. Some people spend their whole lives chasing recognition, he said softly. You spent yours giving it away. Nathan simply smiled and wished him a safe walk home. After the front door closed and the rain once again became the loudest sound in the house, Claire looked at Nathan with new eyes, realizing that the greatest story sitting in front of her was the one he seemed most determined never to tell. Long after Lily had gone upstairs and the house had grown quiet, Claire stood beside the guest room window watching the rain fade into a gentle mist. The highways were still closed, and her phone continued buzzing with messages from assistants, board members, and anxious executives asking when she would return. For the first time in years, she silenced every notification without reading another word. Her thoughts remained fixed on the quiet man downstairs who seemed determined to make his remarkable past disappear beneath an ordinary life. Sleep refused to come. Around midnight she stepped carefully into the hallway, hoping to find a glass of water without disturbing anyone. A faint light glowed beneath the study door. She paused for a moment before gently knocking. Come in, Nathan called. He looked up from an old photo album resting on his desk and smiled warmly. Could not sleep either. Claire smiled apologetically. I guess my mind is still catching up with today. Nathan closed the album without hesitation. Coffee? She nodded. A few minutes later they sat across from one another with steaming mugs between them while the old desk lamp cast a warm glow across the room. Claire hesitated before speaking. Frank said some things tonight. Nathan let out a quiet breath. He means well. Were you really a police officer? For several seconds only the ticking wall clock answered. Finally Nathan nodded once. Yes. Claire waited for more, but none came. And the medals? He glanced toward the closed cabinet. Those belong to a team. I only happen to be wearing them. His answer carried the same humility she had noticed all evening. There was no pride, only gratitude. Claire studied him carefully. You speak about it as though it belonged to someone else. Nathan looked toward a framed photograph of Lily sitting on the corner of his desk. Life has different seasons. That chapter ended. This one matters more. His voice remained calm, but Claire sensed years of quiet reflection behind every word. She chose not to press him further. Later that night, after Nathan wished her good night, curiosity gently outweighed hesitation. Using only publicly available information on her phone, Claire searched his full name. Within seconds, archived newspaper articles appeared on the screen. One headline described a highly respected lieutenant recognized for extraordinary leadership during multiple emergency rescues. Another article praised his commitment to community policing, highlighting programs that strengthen trust between officers and neighborhood families. There were photographs of Nathan standing beside fellow officers, smiling children, grateful families, and civic leaders presenting commendations. Every article repeated the same themes: integrity, humility, service, respect. Then Claire found the final article. It explained that Nathan had retired earlier than expected after the heartbreaking loss of his wife, choosing to devote himself completely to raising his young daughter. There were no dramatic interviews, no complaints, and no attempts to seek public sympathy. He had simply stepped away with quiet dignity and disappeared from public attention. Claire slowly lowered her phone. The man who now spent his days opening car doors, helping strangers with groceries, and driving busy professionals across the city had once carried enormous responsibility without ever allowing it to define his identity. She remembered every small moment from the evening. The way he thanked Lily for passing the bread. The way he quietly wiped the rainwater from the floor before anyone could slip. The way he closed the cabinet instead of talking about medals. In boardrooms she had met countless people eager to list every accomplishment before introducing themselves. Nathan Mercer had done exactly the opposite. He had hidden every reason to admire him and revealed only the qualities that mattered most. As Claire looked once more toward the softly lit hallway outside the study, she realized that the greatest measure of character was not how brightly someone's past had once shined, but how gently they carried that light into every ordinary day that followed. Morning arrived wrapped in soft gray clouds as the last traces of rain drifted away from the neighborhood. Sunlight filtered through the maple trees, leaving tiny diamonds of water on every leaf outside the kitchen window. The city was slowly coming back to life, and traffic alerts reported that most major roads had finally reopened. Lily hurried downstairs carrying her backpack while Nathan flipped pancakes on the griddle with practiced ease. Claire watched the familiar routine unfold with quiet admiration. Every movement seemed effortless. Every word carried patience. Breakfast ended with laughter after Lily declared that her father's pancakes were better than anything served in fancy restaurants. Nathan pretended to disagree, but the smile on his face gave him away. A short while later, he drove both Lily and Claire toward town. They dropped Lily off at school first, exchanging warm hugs before she skipped happily through the front entrance. As the SUV merged back into the steady flow of traffic, Claire noticed how many people waved at Nathan from sidewalks, coffee shops, and neighborhood storefronts. He greeted every person with the same gentle nod, never lingering long enough to draw attention to himself. "You seem to know everyone," Claire observed. Nathan smiled lightly. Living in one place long enough has a way of making strangers become neighbors. They reached the downtown business district just before noon. Streets were crowded with commuters making up for the previous day's delays, and delivery trucks lined nearly every block. Claire had barely stepped out of the vehicle when an unexpected commotion unfolded across the street. An elderly gentleman standing outside a neighborhood pharmacy suddenly appeared unsteady as several shopping bags slipped from his hands, scattering groceries across the wet sidewalk. People looked over with concern, but the busy intersection and heavy traffic left many uncertain about how to help safely. Before Claire could react, Nathan had already crossed the street with calm, purposeful steps. He knelt beside the gentleman, speaking in a reassuring voice that remained too soft to hear from a distance. He helped the man settle comfortably onto a nearby bench, gathered every grocery item one by one, and politely asked a passerby to bring a bottle of water from the pharmacy. His movements were unhurried and confident, never creating panic, never raising his voice. Within moments, several others joined him, following his calm example. Someone contacted the man's daughter while another employee from the pharmacy brought additional assistance. Nathan stayed beside the gentleman until he saw the worried daughter arrive, then quietly handed her the recovered grocery bags and wished them both well. He turned to leave before anyone could thank him publicly. Claire had watched the entire scene from across the street. There had been no dramatic gestures, no desire for recognition, only quiet leadership that encouraged everyone else to become part of the solution. A young college student who had recorded part of the moment on her phone lowered it and whispered to her friend, "That man made everyone calmer just by showing up." Nathan returned to the SUV as though nothing unusual had happened. "Looks like everything is all right," he said simply while fastening his seatbelt. Claire studied him for a long moment. "You always know exactly what to do." He looked out through the windshield where the morning sun finally broke through the clouds. "Most people already know what to do," he replied softly. "Sometimes they just need someone to remind them that kindness can be contagious." As they drove away, neither of them noticed that the short video recorded on the sidewalk had already begun spreading across social media, with thousands of viewers asking the very same question. Who was the quiet man who stepped forward without asking for recognition and disappeared before anyone could even learn his name? By late afternoon, the short video had traveled far beyond the downtown intersection where it had been recorded. It appeared on neighborhood community pages first, then local news feeds, and finally across statewide social media accounts. Thousands of comments praised the quiet stranger who had calmly stepped forward, encouraged everyone around him, and quietly disappeared before accepting a single compliment. People called him the kind of neighbor every town hoped to have. Others wondered whether anyone knew his name. Claire watched the growing stream of reactions from her office, but one comment immediately caught her attention. A retired police captain had written only one sentence. "That is Lieutenant Nathan Mercer. He has been serving people long before this video was recorded." Within minutes, dozens of former officers, firefighters, teachers, and community volunteers began sharing memories of Nathan. They spoke about school safety programs he had organized, charity drives he quietly supported, and the way he always remembered children's names during neighborhood events. No one described him as a hero. Instead, they described him as dependable, humble, and kind. Somehow those words carried even greater weight. Local reporters quickly uncovered archived newspaper photographs that Claire had already discovered the night before. Side by side, the younger officer in the old photographs and the quiet driver from the viral video were unmistakably the same man. Television stations invited former colleagues to speak. Each interview sounded remarkably similar. They praised his character before mentioning his accomplishments. They talked about respect before recognition. They remembered his patience before his awards. Early the next morning, Claire arrived at Nathan's house carrying a small box of pastries from a neighborhood bakery. She found him loading Lily's backpack into the SUV exactly as he did every school day. He looked pleasantly surprised to see her. "Good morning," he said warmly. "You are here early." Claire smiled. "I thought breakfast might taste better with fresh cinnamon rolls." Lily clapped happily. "Best surprise ever." Before anyone could sit down, a dark sedan slowly pulled into the driveway. A middle-aged woman stepped out wearing the formal uniform of the county police department. Nathan recognized her immediately and quietly sighed with an amused smile. "Chief Alvarez." She walked toward him with genuine affection rather than ceremony. "Nathan, I should have known you would find another way to help people without telling anyone." He chuckled softly. "Old habits." She looked toward Claire and Lily before turning back to him. "The department would like to recognize you during next week's community appreciation event. The mayor will be there. So will many of your former partners." Nathan gently shook his head. "There are officers serving today who deserve that spotlight far more than I do." Chief Alvarez smiled knowingly. "That answer is exactly why we are asking. For a long moment Nathan remained silent. He glanced toward Lily, who looked at him with hopeful eyes, then toward Claire, whose quiet smile carried nothing but encouragement. Finally he nodded once. "I will come. But only if the event focuses on everyone who serves the community, not just me." Chief Alvarez extended her hand. "Agreed." After she drove away, Nathan looked almost embarrassed by the attention. "I never expected any of this." Claire looked at him gently. "Maybe recognition is not always about celebrating the past. Sometimes it reminds people what quiet character still looks like." Nathan lowered his eyes with his familiar humility. "If even one person chooses kindness because of yesterday, then that will be more than enough for me." Claire realized that every article, every award, and every heartfelt story she had read had been true. The greatest honor Nathan Mercer carried had never been the medals locked inside the cabinet. It was the trust he quietly earned from people whose lives had become better simply because he had crossed their path. 1 week later, the community appreciation ceremony filled the old civic auditorium with neighbors, teachers, firefighters, police officers, students, and families from every corner of the county. American flags stood quietly beside the stage while sunlight streamed through tall windows, bathing the room in a warm golden glow. There were speeches, photographs, and heartfelt stories celebrating ordinary people who had chosen service over recognition. Nathan almost did not attend. He stood near the entrance wearing a simple navy suit that had clearly been kept for special occasions, looking far more comfortable in the crowd than at the center of attention. Lily reached for his hand and smiled. "You promised." Nathan smiled back. "You always remember my promises." They found their seats near the back of the room, exactly where Nathan preferred to be. Claire arrived a few moments later. This time she ignored the reserved front row prepared for business leaders and elected officials. Instead, she quietly walked toward Nathan. Without saying a word, she sat beside him. Nathan looked slightly surprised. "They saved a seat for you up front." Claire shook her head with a gentle smile. "Today I would rather sit beside someone who reminds me what leadership really looks like." Before Nathan could answer, the master of ceremonies invited Chief Alvarez to the podium. She spoke not about impressive statistics or famous accomplishments but about trust, humility, and the quiet courage that transforms communities one small act at a time. Then she looked toward the audience. Some people spend years trying to be noticed. Others spend years making sure everyone else is seen first. Today we recognize one of those rare people. The room turned toward Nathan as Chief Alvarez invited him onto the stage. He hesitated only briefly before standing. Lily squeezed his hand one last time and whispered, "Go, Dad." Nathan walked forward with the same calm steps Claire had watched so many times before. There was no dramatic music, no grand entrance, only respectful applause that gradually grew into a standing ovation. Former partners smiled proudly. Teachers nodded with gratitude. Neighbors clapped with genuine affection. Nathan accepted the commemorative plaque with both hands before stepping to the microphone. The applause slowly faded into complete silence. He looked across the room for a long moment. Before speaking, "Thank you for this kindness. But if there is one thing I learned during every season of my life, it is that no badge, no title, and no career lasts forever. What remains is how we treat the person standing in front of us on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Respect costs nothing. Kindness never expires. And the greatest reward is going home each night knowing someone else's burden became a little lighter because you were there." He paused and smiled toward Lily. "The most important job I have ever had has never been wearing a uniform. It has been being a father." The auditorium fell perfectly still before another wave of heartfelt applause filled the room. Claire felt tears gathering in her eyes, not because of the awards or the recognition, but because every word reflected the man she had come to know inside a warm little house during one unexpected storm. After the ceremony ended, families slowly drifted outside into the bright afternoon sunshine. Nathan carried the plaque under one arm while Lily proudly held his hand. Claire walked beside them until they reached the familiar black SUV. Nathan politely opened the rear passenger door as he always had. Claire smiled, gently closed it, then walked around to the front passenger side and opened that door instead. Nathan looked at her with quiet curiosity. She met his eyes and said softly, "I have spent enough time sitting behind you. If you do not mind, I would rather sit beside you from now on." A warm smile crossed Nathan's face, simple and sincere. Lily laughed happily from the back seat as the three of them drove away beneath a clear blue sky. Sometimes the greatest miracles do not arrive with flashing lights or extraordinary fortunes. Sometimes they begin with an unexpected storm, a small family dinner, and a humble heart that never stopped choosing dignity over applause, proving that true greatness is never measured by the honors displayed inside a cabinet but by the quiet goodness that continues long after the world has stopped watching. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more emotional stories like this. And before you go, what state are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. See you in the next story.